I'm Steve Rasnic Tem. For this program on setting his character, I'll be reading from my novel Deadfall Hotel, the most extensive example of that in my work. The main characters are the former proprietor Jacob Asher, the new manager Richard, and his daughter Serena. Here's our first description of the hotel from the diaries of the former proprietor and now caretaker, Jacob Asher. Deadfall Hotel. A curtain of gnarled skeletal oak and pine hides it from the rest of the world. The hotel is not well lit. There is no sign, and night comes early here. The main highway bypassed its access road nearly half a century ago. From the air, and a few private pilots still venture over out of curiosity, the hotel appears to follow the jumbled line of a train wreck, cars thrown out at all angles, and yet still attached in sequence. Additions have been made haphazardly over the years, torn down, rebuilt, fallen into disuse. Repairs have not always been effective. From the back, facing the lake, boarded up windows, doors, even entire discarded sections may be seen, coated in slightly different shades of paint, constructed of a miscellania of materials and in a range of styles, but the owners have always tried to maintain a uniform appearance in the front of the hotel, facing the road. They have established facades like film sets over some sections of the structure. Although the hotel has more than 300 rooms, fewer than a third are serviceable on any given date. The staff has always been kept small, and the repairs are too many. Systematic repair schedules have been attempted, but time seems to work its destructions at varying rates throughout the rooms, favoring some and wreaking havoc on others, so that projections as to the decline of any one part are virtually impossible. Walking here, you become disoriented to time, place, even spatial relationships, unless you have a guide, unless you are of the right frame of mind or species. The current proprietor will not bother you. He will want to respect your solitude, and besides, he will have too much else on his mind. Once again, his predecessor has stayed on as caretaker. The hotel takes its name from the grove. Those who stay here often complained of the trees in their dreams, long, snake-like, involved limbs they imagine must mirror the tree's root system. Limbs you feel compelled to follow, in and out of shadowed hollows where branches disappear, where nests newly inhabited or ancient and abandoned are hidden. In parts of these trees, the branches are so interlocked with individual trees and among members of a group that the strongest wind will not free them. Yet when the time comes, and only the grove itself seems to know the secret to this timing, certainly no natural thing, past proprietors have allowed botanists to study the grove, and all have been at a loss to explain its peculiar physics. The branches, the deadfall, fall with rifle shot sound and abruptness to join the decades-old clutter layered beneath. Running such a hotel requires a special calling or need. There are visitors coming, guests who have nowhere else to go. As you might imagine, spring cleaning is a challenge in such a place. When the workers pulled up to the hotel in assorted pickups, vans, rusted Volkswagen Bugs, and stripped down and sloppily puttied old Cadillacs, Richard was ready for them. He'd prepared a rough map of the hotel, breaking it down into areas and assigning so many workers to each area, accompanied by a specific list of tasks. That had required some occasionally puzzling input from Jacob. The full meaning of such tasks as wrap the yellow vase at the end of the hall in number 14 copper wire, and dip the fringe of the triangular area rug with the red cat pattern into a solution of 3 parts graphite and 1 part lemon juice, but under no circumstances do the same to the similar rug with the green cat pattern, was not immediately apparent. So what does this mean? Stand with your back to the closet door while rubbing 2 ounces of butter on the back side of the lower right-hand door frame. Jacob studied the note on the map, hastily scribbled in his own handwriting, and said, You had best obtain someone unusually limber for this particular task. I saw a couple of tall young men. Perhaps one of them will do. So what does it mean? I have no idea, Richard. Terrific. That is simply the way it has always been done. I received these instructions from the manager before me. Now I'm giving them to you. There are rituals about these things, precautions to take, restrictions to be respected. It has all been passed down. I just wonder how I'm going to remember all this. Well, when you aren't here anymore. You just will. I did. You find you have to. But the nature of the deadfall seemed increasingly unreal and arbitrary, something to be memorized, to deal with ritualistically, to be accepted as a matter of faith. Working on that map made it clear how confused Richard's sense of the hotel structure actually was. He thought he knew where most of the rooms were by now, and their relationship to various central architectural features such as halls, chimneys, and staircases. But once he started diagramming them, the pieces didn't all fit. It appeared impossible to capture the hotel on paper. Rooms were either larger or smaller than they should have been, and the separate pieces of the hotel seemed incapable of forming a coherent whole. Chimneys did not flow unbroken from floor to floor as they should have. Tracing one such chimney all the way up from the basement, Richard discovered that it took several impossible jobs, changing its position a full 10 feet from floor 2 to floor 3, as well as the type of brick from which it had been constructed, and in no way matching the apparently corresponding chimney leaning precariously from one side of the deadfall's roof. He had similar problems making sense of the construction of staircases and the arrangement of pipes and ductwork moving between rooms and floors was an impossible tangle. We have to clean all the ducts somehow, Jacob muttered in passing. I shuddered to imagine all that might be growing inside them. Richard got the bright idea of attaching a long cord to the heavy detached wheel of a toy wagon and tossing that down the ducts to see where it might lead. He could hear it clanging in the metal shafts for a long time, bouncing off walls, taking long drops, then silence. Then the cord burned its entire length through his hands, the whole of it disappearing into the dark mouth of the duct. Every few hours, he would hear it in some distant wall or rattling the boards under his feet or making a brief appearance at the bottom of a toilet bowl before disappearing again. He and Jacob tried to pay the smaller workers to climb into the ducts with a sponge, a bucket, and a net, but they got no takers at any price. They decided to clean the best they could with mop heads attached to long limber poles and leave it at that. The used mop heads were dumped into a pile by the driveway. Now and then Richard would prod it with one of the long poles. There was always some arousal of movement, and tiny things scuttled or slithered out of the pile into the tall grass. Once Richard had read a book all about house mites, how they fed on tiny flakes of human skin, how millions of them lived in even the cleanest of houses. He imagined those mites, nourished in the perfect environment and magnified hundreds of times. Deadfall mites. Jacob assigned Richard the task of inspecting the cleaned areas of the hotel. In Richard's experience, there had always been some buildings that looked huge on the outside, but proved cramped and impossible to navigate inside. Other smaller looking structures appeared to go on forever for those taking a first-time tour. He'd noticed it from the beginning, but today underscored the impression. The deadfall managed to be huge, both outside and in. From the outside, the central section resembled one of those grand old mansions from the South, with large white columns framing the enormous hand-carved front doors. The columns supported an elaborately carved porch, roofed 2 stories off the ground, and small windows like peepholes had been carved out of the wall above the doors in an arcing arrangement. On either side of the columns were the great front windows, 4 to a floor, each running practically floor to ceiling to maximize light and impressiveness. Out of the central portion, the wings spread, but instead of running parallel to the porch line, they were composed of segments which stepped back from the main building at random angles, following the slope and irregularities of the hillside, so that the farther from the front doors, the more chaotic and less elegant the structure became as it groped for stability, and the natural stresses of gravity pulled walls and framing out of alignment until you arrived at the last segment, which should have been condemned. In fact, many sections were boarded up and isolated from the rest of the hotel. Richard thought the deadfall looked not so much constructed as landed, the body of some great creature fallen to ground and into its final resting place. He had been assembling a rough interior map of the hotel since his first few days here, surprised that one didn't already exist. Every new manager starts one, Jacob explained, but I'll eventually quit the enterprise. You will too, I assure you. Richard's map was now several sheets taped together, walls drawn with pencil erased and redrawn, arrows used to indicate geometry, which made no logical sense. He did the main structure first, which was straightforward enough, although he did have trouble in the southeast corner of the 3rd floor, where one room featured closet within closet within closet, the final closet, leading him out to the middle of the 2nd floor hall, with no sensation of having descended. He entered a number on the sheet for each room or hall, described its location as best he could, added notations regarding closets, private baths, and similar utility spaces, and attempted some critique of the cleanliness. Floor spotless, sitting could use some work, mirror over the fireplace filthy or severely corroded. Sometimes he caught a glimpse of residents, gray flesh, curled claw, balding, rash-eaten head, as they quickly entered a closet or hid behind a curtain while he made his inspections. This always embarrassed him, even made him feel slightly ashamed of himself. Many residents didn't let him in at all, of course, and these he duly noted and went on his way. Jacob had told him that a number of them chose to travel during the annual cleaning period, and in their rooms, Richard often found personal possessions awaiting their owner's return. Odd, unshapely garments, twisted bits of toy, elaborate wrappings, ornate brushes and combs, scissors, and accompanying tools of unimaginable purpose he assumed to be grooming devices. There were also pets in covered cages, whose plaintive, ominous cries he decided it best to ignore. The wings proved more difficult, as he had expected. The hall seldom followed straight lines, and the twists, turns, and doublings back made him abandon his descriptions of location in favor of relative descriptions, 18 steps down the hall from the previous door. Ceiling heights were unpredictable, so that sometimes he had to crouch and other times there was insufficient light to tell him the ceiling's height, but he knew it was some distance because he could hear things flying up there. Throughout the novel, Richard has to deal with the practical issues of running a hotel of this size. One of these issues is the plumbing. Jacob's steps dropped him further into gray night. Richard followed, half smiling, carrying the tools. The door at the bottom of the stairs was much older, black, oily wood reinforced with iron. Pieces splintered off the bottom as the door scraped open. Jacob led him through a maze of rooms crammed with pipes. Circulation, he said. Water, gas, sewer, electrical. It is all here. Blood, piss, and vinegar. At one corner, they came across a huge boiler-like device with a multitude of pipes and coils arranged around the top like an elaborate metal hairdo. One of your predecessors thought he could power the hotel with this device. Spirit trap, he called it, I think. But I suppose it made too much noise for him. Jacob would stop now and then to examine the chalk markings on one of the pipes, then with renewed energy, maneuver through a series of sudden bends in the passageways. Once he stopped before a small, rusted hatch set flush into the wall, not quite at his head height. Here is something I would like to show you. He wedged the end of a wrench under one corner of the hatch and pried it open. He stuck the flashlight in first, then cautiously followed with his head. Okay, come here. As Jacob brought his head back out, Richard examined him for spider webs. Jacob handed him the flashlight. Take a look, he said. Position your head just inside the door. Wait a minute. Richard stared at the hatch. It was pitch black inside. It is clean. You saw me check it. Nothing waiting to lay an egg on your head, I assure you. Richard glared at the caretaker and grabbed the flashlight out of his hand. Hold the hatch, just so it doesn't slam back or anything. Jacob nodded, drumming his fingers irritatingly on the eggshell metal. Richard stuck the flashlight in through first. Bright red brick lined the passage. Warm circulating air left goosebumps on the back of his arm. Puzzled, he pushed his head through the opening. A breeze of near-hot air lifted his hair, but he could see very little. A vertical column of brilliant red brick, pitch dark on either end. What is it? He called back. Heating system. That's why the hotel isn't nearly as cold as one might expect. Wait, what about that big furnace thing over in the auxiliary basement? We're nowhere near there. Richard trained the light on the shaft below him. No end in sight. He squinted for a long time, trying to see what might be there, sometimes thinking he saw bits of cloud or dark shapes in the air currents, sometimes thinking he heard a sighing, music, or just the slightest trace of laughter, before Jacob finally answered. What you saw was just the incinerator for burning trash, like unfriendly kitties. He paused, as if expecting Richard to laugh at the weak, grim joke. We don't use it for heating. There is no furnace here, no furnace anywhere. Richard came out of the hatch and looked at Jacob. Jacob frowned. I've looked for years, and in the summer that air's ice cold. I've dropped stones into the shaft. They never make a sound. It's the deadfall windpipe, or something like that. He chuckled. I don't know who built it, but he or she was a genius. No doubt about that. He took the light back. We'd best hurry now. Our job's waiting for us just a short distance down this passage, if I've calculated correctly. They came to a tall room. It was like entering a chimney. A dozen or so pipes, jammed together tight as organ pipes, dropped straight out of the darkness above. At waist height, they joined other pipes, which entered the crumbling brick and plaster walls at right angles. Each pipe had two valves, one on either side of the angle. Here it is, Jacob said. At first glance, it looks like a random design, I know. I'm always surprised they don't clog more often. Rubbing the dust from the pipes, he tapped a small tube entering the upper valve from the rear. Richard could see now that all the valves had them. It took me a while to figure it out, Jacob began, but it appears that these tubes add pressure inside each valve and help push the substance inside the pipe, fluid or gas or solids, whatever it might be, to wherever in the hotel it needs to go. He flashed the light several feet above the valve. An oily and pus-like corrosion kicked some of the metal. These pipes are old. A long segmented bug with near transparent head waved its greasy feelers at the intruding beam of light. Disgusting, Richard muttered. The air suddenly felt too wet, too old in his mouth. He wanted to spit it out. He felt a little panicky. He felt like throwing up. You never make a good doctor, Jacob said. What's that? I just mean if you were to put your hands inside these bodies of ours, you'd find the state of affairs equally disgusting. The hotel has to breathe, heat up and cool down, get rid of its waste. The secret systems of anything, however wonderful, aren't always pretty to look at. Not for the first time, Richard wished the old man would just shut up. He had a headache and realized he was hungry again, starved. Jacob's hammer rang on the valve stems as he attempted to loosen them. The sound echoed over their heads, receded rapidly into the darkness above. Jacob had been using a huge wrench to loosen one of the valves. Now he pulled down on the bend that attached below it. The metal squealed, the joint held by a thread. He banged on it twice more. Widowers in British New Guinea, he panted. Macao, I believe. They carry a tomahawk to protect themselves from their dead wives. She wouldn't hurt me. Perhaps not. No, I'm sure not. But memory is a hungry thing, a craving thing. If you don't carry your tomahawk, it can eat up your time, consume your life. There we go. Come over here, Richard. Jacob held the flashlight up to the open end of the valve. Wrong one, he said. But listen. The thing crying slipped out of the pipe. Richard felt it like a worm on the back of his neck. They tried several more pipes, found water, still dusty air, laughter and lamentations. Then on the last one, Jacob said, Got it. His arm and a crowbar pushed halfway up the pipe. Stuck tight, whatever it is. Finally, the thing came away with a cracking sound, and dark, messy sewage gushed from the pipe and began pooling on the floor. Richard gasped, covered his mouth with his hand. Jacob struggled to reconnect the joint, his boots sliding a dance through the thick, lace-high goop. There, he shouted, tightening the retainer rings so far Richard thought the ancient metal would split. This is some old crap, is the way a professional plumber would put it, I believe. He grinned, slipped on rubber gloves, and began fingering through the sludge. The surface of the gloves smoked when he brought them back up into air. The offending object held well away from him. He stroked it gently, like a baby's head, cleaning it off. It was a small skull, an animal skull, its lower teeth carved high up over the nasal area, threatening the eye sockets. I told him not to flush these things down the toilet anymore, Jacob muttered, almost sadly, and dropped the skull into his sack. Thank you.